What's up, y'all? So, anytime I find myself having a whole ass conversation by myself, I just stop and turn on my camera because it doesn't make sense to be in here having a whole ass conversation by myself. Um, so, I just want to come back to this conversation about um, this space of climate chaos and planetary destruction, ecological destruction that humans are in right now. And that we're bolstering. And I just watched a video by Charles Eisenstein, who wrote "A More Beautiful World is Possible." The more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And you know, I've had a chance to meet Charles and be in conversation with him, and I've read his book, and I love lots of what he says, and I think he's really smart. And I think, you know, he talks about creating a new story, and that the story we're in must die in order for a new story to be born. And I resonate with that so deeply. But he recently posted a video about the Amazon. And one of the things that I think is 1,000,000,000% true is the idea that like fighting, that taking this anxiety, this apocalyptic anxiety that we've talked about, and operating it as rage fueled, hate directed at someone or something is ineffective. And I actually agree with that. And I don't believe, though, that disruption and dismantling have to be rage fueled. I believe that they can be strategic and intentional and guided by deep principles of love. So I think there may be some divergence in that. But what he said that I agree with is like that we must change the conditions that have led to the circumstances that we see, such as, the Amazon being on fire, right? That deforestation and logging and exploitative late stage capitalism, those are conditions, right, that have created this particular ecological devastation, and that changing the conditions it involves our own individual contributions to changing the conditions, both socially, both politically, both spiritually, right? Now, all of those things are absolutely aligned with what it is that I think and say and talk about. Here's where I get lost every single time I listen to folks talk about ecological devastation and climate chaos and climate crisis as the need to save the earth. I find it's so jarring that it takes me out of conversations. And part of the reason I think it takes me out of conversations is because it feels so wildly rooted in white saviorism. We have to save the planet feels so wildly rooted in white saviorism. It reminds me of Farm Aid in the 80s and the like We Are the World, and like, that did all of this like really problematic mental perspective around those things that I think led to further damage later on, right? Like the visual of starving Ethiopian children with flies around them, right? And that became synonymous with what the cultural perspective of African nations became, right? That Africa became one country with a bunch of starving children with flies around them. And so there is a function of this save the planet that is rooted in white saviorism. And part of that is because there has to be that there is something in the function of whiteness that has to be in control, that has to see itself as in control of things. And sometimes that is to the detriment and damage of the world. I would offer that it ultimately is always to the detriment and damage of the world. Sometimes those acts are malicious and exploitative and greed-based, like Bolsonaro and the capitalists' interests that are destroying the rainforests in Brazil. And then sometimes those inclinations appear more altruistic. They appear kinder, gentler, nicer, But the impetus is the same. And I had a friend who emailed me after I did the video about white male identity as being externally defined, right? And like that because there's a lack of radical self-love, there's a way in which white men identify themselves through external factors. And my friend wrote me and said that he could relate to that so much, but what he related to was it in the generous way. Like, I'm not good enough if I'm not serving, or if I'm not being, hyper giving, and as many times as I help somebody, that's as good as I am. Or, so sometimes there are these skews on that notion that appear very, beneficent. But that does not change the fact that they're ultimately problematic. And so again, the notion of saving the planet presents humans as far more powerful than we actually are in relationship to the planet. It is a skewed perception of power. The reality is that we can tinker, like I think about this more like the climate crisis as poking a bear or playing around at a beehive, right? That you're like, oh, there's a thing that I'm in relationship with that is near me. And rather than being in a synchronistic relationship with it, I'm just going to keep messing with it because I want to see how it works, or I want to keep messing with it so that I can get honey from it, or I want to keep messing with it because I think it's cute or interesting, and I'm going to keep messing with it so that I can meet some need of my own. And then I'm going to trigger a response from that thing that ultimately will harm me and others around me, right? Like, say I'm poking the bear, but there's a whole bunch of people around me. When that bear lashes out, that bear is not going to just lash out at me. That bear is about to maul all of us, right? That to me is actually the relationship that we're in with the planet, where we have done things that keep disrupting the planet's balance. It's rest, it's synchronicity, it's divine timing. We keep poking that bear. And while we're poking that bear, we're starting to see that bear get up and lash out. That bear is, and that's looking like, the change in weather patterns. That's looking like the coral reefs dying. That's looking like deforestation. That's looking like a whole bunch of things, right? A whole bunch of experiences in our environment that are happening as a result of us messing with this bear. At the end of the day, we are not more powerful than the bear. We're not more powerful than the hurricane. We're not more powerful than the ocean. We are not more powerful than any of the systems that govern the natural order of this space. And just because we mess up things that we understand in this space, we mess up trees, we mess up water, we mess up, fish and other living species. We are messing up the things that are necessary for us to remain here. So we say we're messing up the planet, but we're not. We're actually messing up our kin, right? Like, the trees are our kin, the fish are our kin. We're messing with our community that is here. And so what's happening is we are not destroying the planet. We are destroying ourselves and our community on the planet, and the planet will evict us. The planet's plan, and short of an asteroid hitting the earth and exploding it to bits, which is not beyond the realm of possibility, the planet will go on. It will look real different, and we won't have any information about what that looks like, because we, as a species, and the other species that are here as part of the ecosystem that allows life to flourish in this way, will be gone. That is what we're looking at. And I think it's important not to frame that as some sort of white savior, externalized thing that we're trying to do. We are the ones in mortal danger. Us and our kin. The trees, the fish, we are the ones in mortal danger. The living things that are required for us to stay here, because we couldn't live here without those things. And I think that's the piece we're missing, is that those are us. The trees are us. And this is what I think indigenous knowledge has been trying to tell us forever, is that the trees are us. The ocean is us. The animals are us. The other humans, are us, that there is no way to separate this web of life that is here. So the thing at risk is the planet isn't on her sick bed. We are on our sick bed. we are 2 seconds away from extinction. And the planet, the earth, will go on, and it will look real different. It'll do something different. It'll decide that the particular mechanisms and organisms that made this function aren't necessary anymore. And it will get rid of them. And it will create something different. And there's beauty in that to me. But there's also terror, right? Because it means that the fullness of what we understand in our minds of this planet will cease to exist. So I just want us to really be mindful about the ways in which these other ideologies seep into our framings. This is not a save the planet thing. We are not, that's a white saviorist perspective. I really deeply believe that. We are trying to save the ecosystem that allows us to exist on this planet. And the planet will get rid of us and do something different. And so I think we got to stop externalizing that. We got to stop being like, we're going to do this for that thing, and recognize that we're actually trying to save ourselves.